Zach LaVine's relationship with the Bulls seems to hit a new low. Who had the best and worst and most surprising offseason? And should FIBA rules and NBA rules be the same? It's all right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On NBA podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for subscribing, getting into that YouTube page, leaving a comment, letting us know what you think about everything that we're talking about. On Wednesdays, we're your normal crew. I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast, on Twitter at NolaJake.
Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs. What am I talking about? As the summer winds down, sports also winding down, unless you want to watch the Olympics. But FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. So there's something for everyone all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Later on, we'll talk about FIBA and the NBA. We're watching the Olympics. We're watching basketball, and the rules are a little bit different. Should they not be different? We'll look into the offseason survey in the second segment, talking about the best, worst, and most surprising moves of the summer. But Jake, let's get into this Zach LaVine relationship with the Chicago Bulls. This relationship is basically over, but I don't think this CBA and this landscape is allowing for the breakup that should have probably happened already. There's a new piece on ESPN taking us through the whole thing, taking us through this whole relationship. And I just want to start with the worst part of it to me. And it's a team source that tells ESPN, quote, he's never won. He's done it his way the whole way and never won. If he's interested in winning, he'll do what's asked of him. And if he's motivated to not be here, one way is to come, be compliant, and be who he is. Is there a more damning quote from a team about one of its star players?
I mean, no, that's pretty bad, right? Particularly because you're looking to trade this guy. And I don't know how that necessarily helps his trade value whatsoever when anonymous sources from within the organization, whether that's a teammate, a coach, a front office person says something like that, that's not going to help him get moved. And it's already been pretty hard. They've been trying to trade him for at least 2 years now. And with the injury and the surgery that he had last season, there's just been really no traction on it. You combine that with the first year of the dreaded second apron and all of that, and it's just really limiting the market for him. It sounds like he wants out there too, that he basically requested a trade and they haven't been able to make it work for, partially they want to be competitive. And prior to last season, he had been healthy, right? He'd been an all-star 2 out of the 3 years prior to the past season. I think that's worth keeping in mind, that he can be a very good, productive player. But is he one that's conducive to winning? And I don't know. And if you're a team that's going to take a chance on him in that contract, knowing what it's going to do to your future flexibility, should you bring him into your team, you can't have a guy that's not going to sacrifice for the team and is only going to do it his way, because that has the chance to kind of just derail everything a team is building.
It's going to be very difficult for a team to trade for Zach LaVine. And that complicates the relationship here, because he's 29. He's got 2 more years left, 43 and 46 million, and then a player option at just about 49 million. That's not great. In this landscape, with the way teams are avoiding second aprons, this is the type of player that maybe a team that's on the cusp is going to say, hey, in the past, you'd say, let's take a swing at Zach LaVine. Let's just say maybe next to our star number 1, our star number 2, we've got some guys. Let's go all in. Let's do the Phoenix model. But that's not going to be possible nowadays. Teams aren't going to be looking to do that. And so where do you go from here? If that source is being honest, and why wouldn't that quote be honest? Here's a guy who at 29 is still unwilling to look in the mirror and say, I've got to be a different player if I'm going to win. You've gotten your money. You've gotten your contract. You're 29 now. You're going to be in your early 30s. You're not going to get this kind of money again, moving on. So how do you justify still being this guy if it's not going to get you off the team that you want to leave? He has no choice but to change, or Chicago's just stuck and they're just going to be mediocre.
They might have been stuck before any of this in the first place. And there's 2 points I want to hit on, and I'll piggyback off of something you just said, right? Like, if they're throwing him under the bus this hard, and this article, on ESPN is pretty much about how their front office didn't pick a direction. They didn't outright tank. They tried to kind of go all in, and it didn't work, and they stuck with that group for too long. You can also read this as them trying to put the blame on Zach LaVine and scapegoating him. Maybe that's fair. Maybe that's unfair a little bit too, to kind of save their own skin when it comes to something like this. I think there's a little bit of that in there too. The other point you mentioned about how, a team might take a flyer on LaVine is given the injury that he's had, given the lack of winning and how big that contract is, he wouldn't be expensive to acquire. This is not someone that it would take 3 first-round picks to go and get. You could probably get him for pretty little in other seasons until this one, where a team like, the Clippers or another organization would have made that move to go and get him because, hey, we'll still have a bunch of other first-round picks to trade to make the team even better. But now if you're in the second apron, you basically can't do anything with that. And that's what I think scares off a lot of teams. So he's as much a victim of himself and that second apron too.
I think the only thing that can be done about Zach LaVine at this point is finding a team with the cap space, attaching a pick or two, and saying, here you go. He's got to play this season. And maybe somewhere along the line next summer, I don't think somebody's going to trade for him knowing that he's got another year plus a player option. He's got to pick up that player option. There's no way he's going to make $49 million,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way he's going to get that somewhere at 31 years old and considering his track record, unless he has some sort of come to Jesus where he realizes I've got to be a more complete player. I've got to be less of what I've been doing and more on trying to fit in with the rest of the team. Unless he has that kind of moment and realizes that and becomes part of a winning team, the only thing you can do is play out this season. And next summer, a team that's below the salary floor has to you can attach a couple picks, trade them into the cap space, and just be done with it. And that's wipe your hands clean of the Zach LaVine experience and move on. I don't see any other choice.
What about if you stretch and waive him? We don't really see that as much because you're eating. So I just did the math because it's double the amount of years plus 1. So it would be 7 years since he has 3 years left. So if you take his current deal, that basically, so you could stretch and waive him, and then whatever that money comes to, instead of spreading his deal out over 3 years, it would be spread over 7 years. So it still counts against the salary cap, but reduces that hit. He's still a $19.7 million cap hit if you stretch and waive him.
Oh my God, no.
I
can't justify that.
If that was $6 million a year, it would be fine, right? But for almost call it $20 million, you can't do that. I agree. What are they over the cap? They are where the numbers.
They're at 140.
Yeah.
So they're close. They're close from what I'm looking at. They're right at the cap. So I think look, if they move on from Vooch and completely go into the tank, you could almost justify the wave and stretch. But because there's 3 years left and you're going 7 years out at that kind of money, theoretically, the first few years, not a problem. That counts towards the salary floor. That should be okay. But then it's years 4, 5, 6, 7, when theoretically you have figured some stuff out, and that's going to push you way over. I just think that money's too big. This is going to end up with him in somebody's cap space for the last year or two. Again, a salary floor team that's instead of paying a surprise guy 2 years, $40 million, they're paying Zach LaVine that money, and they can get their tax payouts from somebody else. They can do with him whatever. He's not going to make them win too many games because he's not a game changer. He's not a game changer.
Too many games.
No, he's not a game changer. So that's it. Like, if Chicago really wants to move out of this, they're $3.5 million over away from the luxury tax. If they want to really kind of clear themselves away from that and get under the cap and all of that stuff, you trade them into cap space. You say goodbye to a couple of picks, and you deal with it, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's ultimately going to happen. There's no easy resolution. If there was, they would have found it by now, right? He wouldn't be on the team. I also, again, blame the Bulls for this, dude. They decided not to tear it down and tank and go through a lengthier rebuild and kind of went all in on this and kept that for too long. That's their own fault, too. It would have been easier to trade LaVine 3-4 years ago, and they chose not to do it. That's why I also read this article a little bit as them just like throwing him under the bus.
Yeah. No, you know what it is? It's not to prolong this too much, but it is a complete lack of foresight. They didn't understand what the collective bargaining agreement was going to do to the market, and they carried this roster into the second apron era. Compare that to what the Celtics did. They carried a good roster. Chicago kind of did some of the same stuff and then realized, like, oh no, the second apron is going to be bad. And they didn't adjust in time. They didn't see it coming, and they were caught with their pants down. The DeRozan trade is part of that too. Now they're stuck with LaVine. The DeRozan trade is a bit of a mess, and that's where Chicago is. That DeRozan trade is part of what, according to ESPN's front office survey from this offseason, is one of the worst moves of this offseason. Let's dive into best, worst, most surprising when we come back. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the place to go even as sports wind down. You want Olympics, you want futures. We talked last week about win totals and all of that. There's a lot still on FanDuel for you to talk about, for you to bet on. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up every single customer, new, existing. You all get a boost or a bonus every single day. So there's something for everybody every day, all summer long. Head on over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. If you want to bet on Major League Baseball, lots of options there. It's your biggest option because that's the sport that's starting to wind down, and we're starting to get into playoffs and wild card and all of that stuff. So check out the Major League Baseball odds on FanDuel. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Hey, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Check out Locked On Sports Today. Shows like us show up on Locked On Sports Today because it's real talk. It's real conversation, not the fake screaming at each other, which we would hear Jake doing if he was not muted at the moment. But the real talk is here on Locked On NBA. So ESPN, they love doing their front office surveys, and they did one here, the offseason survey, where they had best offseason, worst offseason, all the moves. It's extensive. They do a great job with this stuff. But we're going to get into the best offseason, the worst offseason, and the most surprising. So let's start with the best. The Philadelphia 76ers get 8 votes. The New York Knicks get 5. Oklahoma City 3. And the Boston Celtics got a couple of votes, even though the Celtics, all they did was just re-sign everybody, but they brought back a championship roster. So let's play a little like mini real or fake. Jake, real or fake, the Philadelphia 76ers did indeed have the NBA's best offseason.
Yeah, I'll go with real on this. You know, it's real, but it's also the luckiest offseason. It's entirely the luckiest offseason as well, I think, because without Paul George and what the Clippers did of just basically being like, yeah, no, we're not going to give you this money when they should have, they can't sign him, and then they're left with all of that cap space, and they're trying to piecemeal fill it, and then it would not look good. So they were real close to also having one of the worst off seasons. But I can go with that. I think this list is good. Like, I have no problems with this. The Knicks made big, all-in aggressive moves. The Thunder made just smart moves with Hartenstein and then Alex Caruso, which fills like the two holes that they kind of had. Like, yeah, those three teams definitely, one of them being lucky, the other two making like good moves.
I think it's real because it's the best player of the group that moved, and it's hard to say that getting Paul George, look, lucky or not, you did it, and you take advantage of stupidity in the NBA, in professional sports. That's what you do. If one front office is too dumb to take advantage or to make the right move, you say, hey, well, let me just swoop on in there and take advantage of this. Look at the Celtics. The Milwaukee Bucks made their move with Damian Lillard, and the Celtics said, oh, damn, we could use this Drew Holiday guy. And they swooped in and they made this great move. Like, you have to be ready to take advantage, which is why I think that while it is real, just because you can't argue against Paul George, he's the best player, Oklahoma City should have gotten more love for their offseason because they addressed needs. It was low-key, smart. It felt like they did more work to make themselves better, and they got the smarter deals done. Whereas Philly was just like, hey, Joel Embiid did a little tampering during the finals, and they're too dumb to offer him the extra year, so here we are. OKC just continues to make super smart moves. So I could have seen this spread out more evenly. You take a couple of votes away from Philly, you throw those to the Thunder, even it all out 5-5-5, and the other votes can go to Boston or whomever else. That, to me, I think they all had equally good off seasons. The worst off season. The list is Denver, Chicago, LA, New York. After somebody voted them best, someone put them in the worst, and Detroit. So let's go into our another mini real or fake. Real or fake, the Denver Nuggets had the NBA's worst offseason.
I think this is fake. I think it's the Clippers had the worst offseason. Like, I've said this on the show multiple times. The Clippers overthought the second apron. I'm so thrilled they can make trades at the trade deadline. Still not going to make them better than if they had Paul George and not making moves. And to me, it's just that simple. Denver still has Jokic. They still have Jamal Murray. They have Michael Porter Jr. They have Aaron Gordon. They didn't lose any one of their top 4 guys. 2 guys, which is kind of the more important thing here. Look, them losing KCP certainly is going to hurt. They did not have a good offseason. This was them being cheap, in my opinion. They could have paid KCP. They chose not to. It's still the Clippers because no matter what they're going to do, they will not be nearly as good as they were a year ago. When we talked about it in last week's show for the everydayers of Locked On NBA, right? Their win total per FanDuel is like 10 less. That's bad.
That's bad. That is really bad. I agree that it's fake. I agree that the team that had the worst offseason is in Los Angeles, and the Clippers are a hell of a choice. I'm going to go with the Lakers because they didn't do anything. They didn't take advantage. They had LeBron James willing to take less money. They had LeBron willing to say, hey, I've made my money. Go get one of these free agents. Make this sign and trade. Go get Klay Thompson. Go get guys that were available. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't pull the trigger. They couldn't get these guys. And maybe they tried and got rebuffed. So be it. But then they went out and gave Bronny a guaranteed spot, which we talked about last week. That guaranteed spot was incredibly valuable. They could have
used Gary Trent Jr. or somebody who I think is good and would have been one of their top 8 guys.
Hey, Tyus Jones just got $3 million. You don't think you could have given Tyus Jones that much? Like, he couldn't have come. He's good. He's good. So, and he just went to the Clippers, right? So that kind of like
the Suns.
Oh, he went to Phoenix. Good move by Phoenix. So he was there. He was there for the taking. So the Lakers' inactivity, giving up that open spot and giving up the missing on the chance to pay LeBron less and to get this gift of money, to not take advantage of that is a huge, huge whiff.
It's not even so much that they couldn't take advantage of it. Right? Like they tried. They were shut down. This is like a guy at a bar going up to every girl trying to hit on him and repeatedly getting shot down at the end of the night. You're like, oh man, that dude's had it rough here. And he's sitting at the bar by himself, probably taking like cheap whiskey shots or something like that. Right. Like,
well, if it's the Lakers in this example, he's got to be like 60 years old, really like leathery tan, also like trying to hold on for too long, too many chains.
But thought he's awesome, right? It's like the guy you almost like want to see like knock down a peg a little bit or something along those lines, right? Like there's Lakers exceptionalism. They're the team that gets the free agents that everyone wants to go to. They couldn't pull anything here, which is so they had a bad offseason for how it impacts their roster, right? But their brand, the mystique of them takes a little bit of a hit too, I think, which is also pretty. If you're a Lakers fan, like that's not what you want. That's your competitive advantage right there. And it feels like it evaporated this offseason.
Yeah, that's tough. So Denver didn't have, I think, the worst offseason. I'm going to go with most surprising, which plays hand in hand, because in this most surprising moves list, my pick is this Kentavious Caldwell-Pope leaving Denver, which only got one vote. The Mikal Bridges trade was number one. Paul George was number two. KCP, like cheaping out the way you just laid it out nicely. Denver cheaping out in Jokic's absolute prime is so shocking to me. Not just bad, it's shocking to me that you have their MVP and you're just hoping that Christian Brown could be the guy to take. How about keeping KCP and having that depth? What are you doing? Why are you cheaping out when Jokic is right there? Just a transcendent player. I know you got your one title. This is an opportunity to get another one. He is that good. Why are you taking away important players who can help? To me, that is beyond bad. It is absolutely surprising.
Yeah, so that's up there. I don't find it as surprising because they kind of did this with Bruce Brown, an offseason ago. Now, it's a little bit different. They didn't have the money for him. It was a bigger contract. But for what KCP got, like they could have done that. So it's not as surprising as we kind of been here before with them. It's surprising in the sense of this wasn't as hard to match or bring him back as it was a year ago. So to have that happen 2 off seasons in a row is a pretty rough look for them. And this was a cheap move. This was we're going to be cheap. And it's not about the flexibility to me. It's not about the second apron. Like they could have made this work and they actively chose not to. The other ones on here don't, the Alex Caruso, Josh Giddey trade is funny. Like that's surprising that there was no draft compensation going to Chicago and that the Thunder got it for got Caruso for so cheap. Everything else doesn't totally surprise me as much, including the Monty Williams firing. That seemed like it was probably going to be heading that direction.
I'm a little surprised by DeJounte Murray going to New Orleans. That was like a little bit of a surprise to me. The Bridges trade came out of nowhere, so I can see why that got 5 votes. But yeah, I mean, this list, just the fact that Jalen Brunson took the extension there, I was actually not surprised by that. I think small guard locking up the money was a smart move. So, all right, so that's the offseason. There's a lot more. We can't get to all of it that on this in this survey, but it's really a good one. The ESPN does a good job with those. All right, let's play our real game of real or fake. And it's in conjunction with Kevin Durant twittering away with a fan over FIBA and NBA rules. That's coming up in just a second. Kevin Durant is just exceptionally online. He is not afraid, and I don't know where he finds people to interact with. He wasn't even tagged. He wasn't even name searched. He just got into, somebody said the FIBA rules and NBA rules should be the same. And then he went and was like, people just be yapping, whatever. And so back and forth over these FIBA and NBA rules. So let's play our favorite game.
I am telling you right now that is not real.
Is this real or fake? Just ask John and Jake.
Real or fake, Jake Madison? FIBA and NBA rules should be the exact same.
Fake. Big, so this is a big time fake to me. There's one or two of the FIBA rules and the differences that I wouldn't mind in the NBA, but let me ask you this. Does like the FIBA rules include the court dimensions? Does it include the shorter 3-point line if we're doing that? Because think about how that crushes spacing in the NBA.
Yeah. So let's do two versions of this question.
Okay.
The one question is, should the FIBA rules be NBA rules, which I think is completely fake.
Yeah,
but
very fake.
should NBA and FIBA play under the same rules? I think that's real. And we've just got to figure out which FIBA rules the NBA adopts and which FIBA rules go away and NBA rules take over. So I agree with you. I think you're on it. FIBA rules should not be applied to the NBA, although there are elements of FIBA basketball, the goaltend after it hits the rim.
So that's the one I would add. Like I would immediately put that in and have no problem with the FIBA goaltending rules. And the difference basically here is, it's the cylinder on the rim. You can't knock it down or block the shot when it's on its downward arc. But when it's touching the rim in FIBA, like you could just swat it away. You can grab it. You can do whatever. In the NBA, that's goaltending. So I'm fine with that. I don't want a smaller court. I don't want a shorter 3-point line because I think that's going to kill spacing and it's going to give us more of that like 90s style of basketball where everything was condensed. And I don't love that necessarily, but I don't want to change the defensive rules, right? There is no defensive 3 seconds. And this was the crux of the Kevin Durant argument in FIBA. I think you have to have that in the NBA. Otherwise, I can't imagine how it would work otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with that. The no defensive 3 seconds, although they didn't have it before, and it was fine. I think that you can have a big at the rim and still figure out a way to make that work. I think what you could do is go back to the trapezoidal lane with if you're going to not let then I think that can you tweak the rules a little bit. But I don't want to get too in the weeds here. I think there's a couple of these things. I think the way the FIBA game is officiated and the goaltending rule should translate over to the NBA, because I love the watching an NBA player try to grift for a foul and not getting it at all. Like that to me is just chef's kiss. So the way the game is officiated, I want it more FIBA style. A little bit more contact is allowed, not falling for those. I always said the way to combat flopping is not to give them techs. It's to not call it, because if a guy flops and falls and you don't call it, you just give the advantage to the other team. You'll learn pretty quickly not to flop and fall, so you don't just give the other team the ball. But the dimensions of the court, in fact, I want a wider court. I want a wider court.
I'd like it bigger. I'm with you.
Yeah. So, and I want to maintain the spacing. So I'm fine with it not being the defensive 3 seconds. So, but I would love to see international basketball, all basketball played under the same rules, and maybe the dimensions of the court, just because of there's a ton of courts in FIBA that you have to retrofit, and that's hard to do. In some of these smaller countries are like, you want us to make this thing bigger? Like, this is all we got. But yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Basically, that's a lot of words for me to say I agree.
Yeah, well, it leads to the bigger discussion here. The other thing is, like, I don't mind the timeout differential between FIBA and the NBA. It's basically just fewer timeouts in FIBA, which, I think the way some of their rules are made, it's just designed to keep the flow of the game going more, right? The goaltending's kind of in there too, that it doesn't lead to an inbound and a stoppage of play. And I like those kind of rules. They're never in a million years going to reduce timeouts in an NBA game, because look, that's less commercials and thus less revenue. And with the new, TV agreement and rights agreement, all that ain't ever going to happen here, but I don't hate that either. Just anything that, makes the games go a little bit faster, but just keeps the flow of the game more, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's the bottom line. I don't like having to like learn these new rules all over again. In international competition. I would love it. I would love it if it was like more uniform, just because when players come over and you go into international competition, it's more indicative of, all right, we're all playing by the same thing. It's one of the things that kind of drives me a little crazy about baseball. As a side note, complete side note, well, everybody plays in these different parks with different walls and different distances. You're like, how can you live in a sport where you hit the ball 350 feet, it's a home run in one park, and it's an out in another park? Like, how is that like indicative of anything? But that's kind of like the same thing. Like, how is somebody who's an elite 3-point shooter in FIBA not all of a sudden struggles because that extra couple of feet? You're like, oh well, it's harder to adjust. Like,
the ball's different too. Like that's a factor into it. Like it's just true. There's other different. Even the NBA players are like, this is weird, and it takes a while to get used to.
Yeah. So bottom line, fake that FIBA rules should be NBA rules, but real that everybody should be playing by the same rules. And that will do it for our show. I can't believe it's already over. We've been talking for half an hour. Really? These things go by fast, even at the end of July.
Even in the off season, when it's like, we got fun topics, there's interesting things to cover. We can make fun of the LA teams, which is always great. Like,
always a good time doing that. That's really where the fun really kicks in. So get into that comment section on YouTube. Let us know what you think there. Of course, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, and watch the show on YouTube, all of that stuff. On Wednesdays, we're your guys. I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast, on Twitter at NolaJake.
We got Pat the designer and Nick Angstead. I think Nick Angstead tomorrow. I'm not sure, but Pat's going to be there. Maybe he'll have some more stuff on the Chicago Bulls situation. Now I would love it if you share the podcast. Tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On NBA podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.